I wanna be like you. I wanna be like you. I wanna be like you. I wanna be like you, you.
Ten years later.
Oh, gosh. Sorry, for those listening, I was just playing Dead, which maybe I should put a viewer discretion thing there or something, because why am I doing it, you wonder? It's because of this show right here, Dead Outlaw, all right, which is a new musical on Broadway right now. And in the show, it's not a spoiler to say that Andrew Durand plays Elmer McCurdy, who dies a quarter of the way through the show. And I thought maybe it would be a fun bit, although not heartening for this show. Not heartening for the intro, I should say, for this episode. Because today we have Thom Sesma on the show. All right, and Thom Sesma has had an incredible stage career. And he's currently in Dead Outlaw. He made his Broadway debut in Longacre. Okay, he was, I believe, one of the first replacements of Longacre. He was in, we get to talking about his relationship with Pacific Overtures, which, my goodness, the relationship that he had with it before he got to do the classic stage production in 2017 starring George Takei. And it is just so fascinating. He gets this song in Dead Outlaw called Up to the Stars, which is kind of like the 11 o'clock number, and it is one of the best songs in the entire score. It is this beautiful Frank Sinatra standard that's just so fun, but it's about a real doctor who's performing an autopsy and who really enjoys what he does and performs a lot of these autopsies on celebrities. And my goodness, he's so fascinating, and we were so lucky to get him in the room. And Dead Outlaw is an original musical happening right now on Broadway with 7 Tony nominations, including Best Musical. I mean, how exciting. You don't really see a whole lot of original musicals on anymore, and that's not to disparage any of the jukeboxes or the movie musicals, but my goodness, it's really exciting, and it's written by someone who I think is one of our greats when it comes to composer lyricists. I think he's one of the greatest we've ever had and one of the greatest we'll ever have, and certainly that we have living right now, and his name is David Yazbek. And I would love to have him on the show. One day we will, and he did it again. He's written The Band's Visit. He's Tony Award winning for The Band's Visit, nominated for Tootsie, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, The Full Monty. I mean, he is just brilliant, and he has done it again with this show. The show is so funky, weird, cool. The score is, very, very country rock folk, but also with some musical theater elements in there. It's really clever, and we're big fans of it. We actually saw it, the first preview, off Broadway at the Minetta Lane Theater first, because anything Yazbek does, I'm there. So especially this team, it was the Band's Visit team: Yazbek, Cromer, Itamar Moses, David Cromer, Itamar Moses. So and also Eric De La Pena, I should say, wrote this with him. Tom's part in this show is so fun. This is the third of our Tonys week. Okay, we hope you enjoyed Jack Noseworthy and Josh Bergas, and now Thom Sesma, which we only have, I believe at this point, a couple days before the Tony Awards, Broadway's biggest night. So we're so happy that we got the chance to do this Tonys week, and we hope you guys enjoyed it. And Tom is going to be performing this Sunday at Radio City Music Hall at 2025 Tony Awards. They're doing a really special little medley section, primarily with the opening number, and it is so fun. Go see Dead Outlaw. And without further ado, today I want to be like Thom Sesma. We feel so lucky that you're here, and I've been doing a bunch of research on you. Well, I saw you when I was in college. I saw you in Superhero.
Shut up!
Yeah. Yep. And,
did you see it when I still had the song?
No.
Oh, that song.
Yeah?
Yeah, that was one of those songs where during rehearsal, it was the best song in the score. And I think it's a pretty off-the-hook score. It's a pretty great score.
Yeah, no, it is a great score.
But it was such beautiful. It was the kind of song where if it had stayed in the show, everybody would be singing that song now.
Oh, really?
It was that kind of thing.
Wow.
And it didn't work. I knew it didn't work
Sure.
from day one.
Sure.
It just wasn't justified. I had a great time seeing it.
Yeah.
And everybody loved it.
Yeah.
You know, the people at Second Stage loved it. Tom loved it. The writer loved it. The entire creative team loved it. Everybody in the cast loved it. But everybody knew it didn't work. And it was like, so when am I going to get that phone call? When are they going to pull me aside? And it was after the first week of previews.
Oh,
you know,
wow.
Jason Moore called me up and said, we're cutting this off.
Who
And I said,
who directed the show?
Jason Moore.
Jason Moore, yeah. That's awesome. I actually really dug that show, and it was like I thought it was so cool, and I thought Bryce was amazing. Kate
Bryce was
awesome.
fantastic, yeah.
All of you guys were just like so great. Yeah. Are you ready, Chris? You feel good? All right, great. Welcome to another episode of I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes. Today, I want to be like Thom Sesma. Thanks so much for doing this, Tom.
Thank you so much for having me.
We feel so lucky to have you. And in researching you, I said that you have a remarkable career. There's so many things that, like, we were watching videos of you yesterday, and I want to ask you a little bit about it in a minute. But Pacific Overtures at Classic Stage, floored. All the videos I found is like, amazing. But we start the podcast with the same question every time, and it is, who is your I want to be like you when you were a kid?
Who did I want to be like when I was a kid? Oh my gosh. I didn't have one person I wanted to be like. I had so many different role models, or, you know, ideologues, I guess you call them.
Yeah.
You know, it's so crazy. I wanted to be a saint. I really did. I was raised Catholic, you know, and so I was in, you know, my heroes were the great martyrs and the great saints, and I could point to, you know, Francis of Assisi or Saint Damien of Molokai and people like that, you know, and I think it very much influenced my my worldview, my attitude about, you know, my attitudes about kindness and love and hard work and sacrifice. You know, those are things I've hung on to. Still want to be a saint.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I want everybody to be a saint.
Yeah, right.
But I also wanted, you know, I remember the first person. Actually, it's an interesting question. The first person I ever idealized, it was when I asked my dad who his favorite actor was. And I didn't know anything back then. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And he said, I really like John Wayne. And from that moment on, John Wayne was a huge influence on my life, you know. I didn't know much about him. You know, I know he was a cowboy, actor, you know, a war movie actor. And so those things kind of influenced me as well. I grew out of that.
Sure.
But yeah, it was that
That's
kind
awesome.
of thing.
That's awesome. So you were born in Japan.
Yes, I was.
But you grew up in San Diego, right?
Yes, I did. Oh, which I am reminded of right now, that I actually did want to be like somebody that I heard a lot about when I was growing up in San Diego as a young Japanese American boy. I didn't have a whole lot of role models. I wasn't aware of a lot of Japanese American figures in our culture. And I'm not making this up. This is absolutely true. Dr. Thomas Noguchi was the chief coroner of the city of Los Angeles, and he was one of the only Japanese American role models that I could point to. That I could say, I want to be like that. I probably didn't even really understand what being a...
How did you know?
You know, because he was prominent. He was in the news. He was at that time sort of making a name for himself as a coroner to the stars. So he was, and I think the first time I ever read about him at length was when he did Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s autopsy. And so here I am, all these decades later, playing Dr. Thomas Noguchi in Dead Outlaw.
In Dead Outlaw. That's so crazy. That's amazing. That's so funny. So when did you know that you wanted to be an actor? Were you a theater kid?
I did a lot of theater when I was a kid. I didn't know what being a theater kid meant, what that was all about.
Yeah, me neither.
I knew there were kids that did theater all the time, but I wasn't aware enough or informed enough to know that they went to special schools or they belonged to certain clubs. But I did a fair amount of school theater. When I went to college, I
Did you go for theater?
No. I studied modern European intellectual history.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I wanted to be a history professor. I was really
Wow.
influenced by my teachers more than anything else, and I had history teachers that I really admired.
Yeah.
So they kind of pushed me in that direction, and I gravitated in that direction anyway.
Wow.
But it wasn't until I saw I gave up theater. I stopped doing plays, that I had done in high school and junior high school and grade
Right.
school and things like that. But I continued to go to the theater, was a big theater fan, and then I went to Los Angeles to see the national tour of the original production of Pacific Overtures in 1977 at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. I saw the curtain. I could say I saw the curtain go up, but it didn't go up. It actually dropped. It was a big kabuki drop. And I saw a stage filled with people who looked like me.
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized in an epiphany that that's what I wanted to do.
Wow.
So I went back to San Diego. I finished another year of school, dropped out of graduate school, and said, I'm going to be an actor.
Wow. So what was your first step? Did you move to New York?
I moved to Los Angeles.
Okay. Yeah, well, that makes
actually,
sense.
before I moved to Los Angeles, I started doing amateur theater in San Diego. By amateur theater, I meant, I had some friends who were amateur actors.
Yeah.
They did a lot of downtown theater in little black boxes. We all smoked and drank way too much.
Yeah.
Did theater that we thought was really, really important, and that was my introduction to acting again. Then I moved to Los Angeles and sort of stumbled my way into the world of the Orange County dinner theater circuit, where I just did musicals.
Yeah.
And then I moved to New York.
Wow.
And the
What
rest
was the
is
job
history.
that got you your equity card?
Flower drum song at the Union Plaza Hotel in downtown Las Vegas.
Wow. How'd you book that?
I had done a stock production of Flower Drum Song
Sure.
in San Diego at the Starlight Theater. I was very fortunate because they were looking for. Normally, they wouldn't have hired a lot of people of color, but they needed Asian American actors in the show.
For Flower Drum Song.
And I auditioned for it, and
Wow.
I got it. And an agent came to see the show. They had another client in that show.
Yeah.
And they submitted me for this production in Las Vegas, and I booked it.
Oh, is that how you got your first agent too?
Yes.
Through
as a
that?
matter of fact, that.
Yeah, wow, that's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah, we always ask those types of questions because I think it's important to talk about that nitty gritty stuff, because oftentimes what you see is like people talk about it and it's like you moved to New York and I booked Broadway. You know what I mean? But it's really not the case, right? Talk to me about what was the first Broadway show that you saw?
Well, this is so funny because I moved to New York and I booked Broadway. That's exactly what happened.
What? Really?
Yeah, I moved to New York in the summer of 1983, and in February of 1984, I was on Broadway.
So you got your equity card beforehand, though?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay,
yes,
okay,
I did.
Okay, I see.
I auditioned. I was the first replacement in the original cast, the original company of Longacre.
Longacre, yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And that was it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. But did you get that through your agent?
No. When I say I got an agent right away, I didn't really understand what an agent was for. I didn't know anything about the business. I didn't go to conservatory. I didn't have a lot of friends who were actors.
Right.
I just knew that it was something I wanted to do. So I kind of hit the ground running.
Yeah.
I bought trade papers.
Yeah.
I did make friends with people that I was working with, and I would ask them what they were doing, how things worked. I made a lot of mistakes. I stepped on a lot of toes, burned a lot of bridges based on my own lack of knowledge. And but I kept persevering, I guess.
Right.
I just kept learning and moving forward, and eventually I learned what an agent was for. When I moved to New York, I didn't have an agent.
Okay.
I just bought Backstage magazine. I saw that there was an open call for Longacre Fall. I went to it. I booked it.
That's amazing.
And then I went through that whole cycle of learning a whole different stage of the business.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what was the thing that? So, I mean, you booked Longacre. Longacre is a huge hit, right? I mean, that's like it's a
back
huge
then,
show.
it ran for. I think it ran for a total of 7 years. That was a huge hit back then.
Yeah.
As opposed to now.
Well, yeah, but still, I mean, a show running 7 years now even would be a marvel in and of itself. You have shows like Moulin Rouge or Hadestown; they're still like major.
Sure.
What would you say is the thing that you learned the most out of Longacre? How long were you in it? I imagine you were in for like a year, right?
I stayed in it for 2 years.
Uh-huh.
Then I left, and then they had me come back for a short while to replace someone else.
Oh.
So I'd say about 2.5 years total.
Oh, very nice. Oh,
Yeah.
very cool. So when you, how come you left Lacage? Was that something that your contract was up and you booked something else?
I
or-
booked something else.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I booked some regional theater.
Okay, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I always say like I think for a lot of people my age, a lot of young actors, it's like Booking Broadway is the cure. It's the answer to everything.
Well, I think for a lot of people it is, and
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people it should be,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that's what they want to do. I have lots of friends. I did Lion King for 3 years.
Yeah.
Lion King Las Vegas, and I have friends who have been a part of the Lion King company since 1995.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's an old joke about asking people what they do for a living, and I could confidently say I'm in show business, but if you ask one of those people what do you do for a living, they say I'm in Lion King.
Right.
Which is a different
Right.
living,
Yeah,
it's
for
a
sure.
different thing. Not to take anything away from it. What
No.
they do is very, very difficult, and the skill set is really, really high. But it is a different thing from what I do.
Yeah.
They have no intention of leaving.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And
if
I
they
think
don't have to.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, if they don't have to, why would they? Phantom had a similar,
Yeah.
essence where there were people in that show for years and years
Sure,
and
sure,
years.
sure.
I want to talk about Pacific Overtures. So I was actually, it's funny that you mentioned. I didn't even realize that they went on tour
They did.
because I watched this video of Hal Prince talking about how they had really went the full mile. They really weren't thinking a whole lot about commercial viability. They were thinking strictly about the art, and the show wound up running 6 months. Which honestly isn't terrible, but it's not. It's obviously not great. So I'm surprised that they even launched a tour with a show that risky.
Yeah, I think that was their. Even though Hal was quoted as saying that, he was a very, very smart producer, and he
Yeah.
had every intention of touring these risky shows.
Yeah.
Follies, Pacific Overtures, those were, I think, in the years they were produced, the most expensive shows produced up to that time.
Wow.
Pacific Overtures had a budget of over $1 million.
Wow.
Over
Yeah,
$1 million. That would
Hello.
give you about 2
Yeah.
weeks on Broadway today.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
It was highly experimental.
Yeah.
They just wanted to make it right. They just
Right.
wanted to dig in deep to the story and see
Yeah.
if this thing worked.
Yeah.
But they had plans to go to Los Angeles. They had plans to go to San Francisco. I don't know if they had plans to go anywhere else. Follies, the same thing. Follies they had made plans.
Wow.
If you read Ted Chapin's great book, Everything is Possible, on Follies, they talk about their plans for a tour.
Oh, wow.
But the tour was very abbreviated because it just didn't make any money.
Yes, right. So tell me how you got involved in that production in 2017. For reference, for those who don't know, this is George Takei was in it. He led it, and Ann Harada and Kelvin. I mean, like you guys had such a great cast, and it was such a cool. Like I wish I'd actually seen it because I was watching videos of it yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, this just feels so inspired. The instruments, John Doyle's direction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean. Yeah, talk to me about that. Talk to me about John Doyle because I know you've worked with him a bunch of times.
That was the first time I worked with John Doyle. I had met John several years before at a benefit for something.
Yeah.
And so he was familiar with my work.
Yeah.
I was asked to come in and audition for it. I went in. John's a really, really interesting, instinctual kind of director. He will look at your resume. He'll have you sing if he doesn't know your work. And then he'll sit and he'll converse because the important thing to John is that he wants to assemble a cast of people that he wants to spend time with.
Yeah, yeah.
He says, we're going to be in a room together for up to 8 hours a day. I want to be able to like you. I want you to be able to like me.
Yeah.
That connection is what's going to make great theater. And I've seen him do this with other people. I guess I was one of those lucky few. He looked at my resume and he said, well, it's clear you can act, so I don't need you to read or anything like that. I sang for him. Mm-hmm. And the next day I got an offer to do it.
Wow.
I think, sometimes you just work with people who they hear about you or they know you're right for something and they just want to work with you. They're willing to take a chance with you.
Yeah.
And John's instincts proved right because we ended up being fairly good collaborators, and we worked 2 subsequent times.
Wow. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the vision behind that production. Was Sonam involved in that production at all?
Only to a very peripheral degree. He showed up on occasion, but he was really, really busy working very hard on what became his final work, Here We Are.
Oh, wow.
He was deep into collaboration with David Ives at that time, so he didn't have a whole lot of time.
Sure.
But he did give his stamp of approval. He was very happy with that production. Some people would call it minimalist. John would call it essentialist. There was only on stage what you needed, what you really, really needed, what was essential to the production to get from point A to point B. And again, it was, and this is a repeated theme in my life because I seem to work with directors like this. They're interested in getting to the core of the work and seeing where that leads them, rather than coming up with a concept that they layer on top, that they try to shoehorn the material into. You know, John just wanted to see how Pacific Overtures unfolded.
Yeah.
With his investigation into the material, and he brought us along for that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why every single performance of that felt like it was unfolding on stage spontaneously every night. It was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it seemed. I wish I had seen that production. Was there any intention to transfer that one?
No, I don't think so. Again, I think John is one of the few directors that really thinks about life beyond the day that you're working. You know, he wants to see where that goes next.
Yeah.
I think in the back of everyone's mind that's involved with it, everyone hopes, you know, oh, if this really works, we can get it recorded, we can get it moved, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think when you make things like that a priority, something else becomes more important than doing the work itself.
Yeah.
You know, I'm doing one of those things right now. I think the great secret to the success of Dead Outlaw, the show that I'm doing right now, is that was how Cromer and Yazbek and Itamar Moses and Eric De La Pena and the entire creative team worked every day, bringing the actors along for the ride. I you know, I've never seen it work so beautifully before. They just wanted to get to the core of how this story works.
Yeah.
It unfolded every day like a kind of mystery.
Yeah.
And if anything came of that, if it became successful, that success was going to be determined by someone else from the outside. They just wanted to see if this story worked.
Right.
If this piece worked.
Right.
And that was our priority every day. And you know what? I don't think I've ever been in anything that has worked so well on a daily basis.
When we heard that Yazbek, so after the band's visit, we saw the band's visit twice. After the band's visit, I was like, I need to look into everything this man has ever done.
Yes.
And I did, and I just like fell in love with his own career, with his own music career, and then also what he's worked on in musicals. And my goodness, because when Dead Outlaw was announced, I was like, Yazbek's doing a new thing. We bought tickets pre-sale. First one, we were like, we're going first. You know, and I'd never been to Minetta Lane, so I was like, this is gonna be funky. This is bound to be weird and cool, and you know, whatever. And talk to me how you got word of Dead Outlaw and what you knew about. Did you have a relationship with Yazbek beforehand? Or no?
I knew Yazbek beforehand. I met Yazbek in 1991, I believe, 92. I was doing a play. It was at Yale and then Circle and Square by Howard Corder called Search and Destroy. And Howard and Yazbek are very, very old friends. I had been a fan of Yazbek since I saw Howard's play Boy's Life at Lincoln Center a few years before. Very famous play that was done by the Atlantic Theatre Company. And Yazbek wrote incidental music. Not incidental music, just connective music in between the scenes. And he wrote this really off-the-hook ska score for it. It was sort of rabid testosterone ska music, you know.
Cool.
And it really appealed to me, not just because of the music, but because of the way it was informed by the material and the way it informed the material.
Yeah.
In other words, it was all a part of how Yazbek always works.
Right.
You know, and then it was thrilling to meet him when I was doing Search and Destroy, and I always said I wanted to work with him after that.
Yeah.
But he was always kind of hanging around, and I was a big sort of lounge singer fan back then, and in Search and Destroy, I had this really, really long monologue in the second half. And I used to do it as this Sinatra song. I would just turn this whole speech into this swinging kind of Sinatra song. I was just making a complete idiot out of myself. And Yazbek saw that, and he thought it was the funniest thing. So flash forward to the summer of 2023. My wife and I had travel plans. This is a long story.
No,
so
tell
I'm just
it,
gonna
tell
go
it.
into this. My wife and I had some travel plans. We were going to do some international travel. And then some things came up which prevented that. And then I got this audition for the untitled David Yazbek project.
Right.
It was for a workshop. And I got the material, and it was the song that I ended up singing in the show. And it was sort of this crazy lounge singer song, except it was about all these dead bodies. And so it had a darkness to it that sort of fit into my kind of toolkit. And I started working on it. I went into the audition, into the room, just a couple blocks from here, I think at Ripley Greer. And Yazbek got up and gave me a big hug. And he said, "I haven't seen you forever." He said, "And I remember you used to do that speech in the second half of Search and Destroy like a Sinatra song."
Oh, wow.
And he started riffing off some of the lyrics that I made up. And I thought it was just so funny that he remembered that.
Yeah.
And then I sang the song. And I realized at that moment that sometimes you wait your whole life to sing a song like this. You wait your whole career. You think that, all of these disparate elements of your life have come together for that moment.
Yeah.
And at that moment, at the end of that audition, I said, you know what? Doesn't matter if I get this job or not. Something very special happened here for me as an actor, bringing myself, bringing what I know, bringing what I like for people that I like and admire.
Yeah.
That's the prize. And a couple weeks later, I got an offer to do it.
Isn't that always the case, right? Where you walk into an audition room and you're letting go, and that's the one you get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where you're not like, I need this job.
Yeah. It was very, very special.
Yeah.
When we walked in the first day of rehearsal and we started working through the script, it was impossible to discern what the show was about. I didn't know at all.
What did you know going into that audition?
Nothing.
Oh.
Nothing.
Wow. How did you know, like, in terms of that song in specific, like, you just knew the style in terms of that Sinatra standard type?
I knew the style. I think the style is somehow, I don't know how, but somehow buried deep into my bones.
Sure.
So it was kind of like putting on a pair of very, very old, comfy shoes.
Yeah.
And, it was just about having fun. It was about sharing that joy and that fun. It was very much like, you use the phrase lounge singer in a derivative kind of way. You dismiss people who are lounge singers, but you don't realize, like, someone who's really good at that does what we try to do as actors, and that is you try to inhabit the material, you live in the joy of what that material is, as an interpreter of the lyric itself, but also as a performer, because you love performing so much and you share that joy with the audience. And so the audience's experience is something where they're being moved by the message of a song, they're being moved by the performance of someone who's inhabiting the song, and they're being moved by a performer who is so in love with the work that they're receiving this gift of love. In other words, it works on two levels. And this kind of coincides with something an acting teacher of mine told me years ago, something that he learned from his acting teacher, a great American acting teacher named John Barry, who called it the game, that the task of an actor is not just to inhabit a character or inhabit material in a truthful way. You can never let the audience forget in this thing called the game that they're watching a performance, even though you try to make them forget they're watching a performance. Because, in fact, they are watching a performance. They want to see a character, but they want to see an actor who just loves what they're doing so much.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge that experience. So it's something that happens I don't know. I guess by accident.
Right.
Not by design. It happens in the air in the middle between the audience and the actor.
Yeah.
And they meet. You know, that's what great performance is. It's when the audience and the actor can meet in the middle.
Yeah.
That's great acting. That's great singing. That's great performance. That's what a great lounge singer does.
Yeah.
I would like to believe that that's what I'm trying to do every night.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really special. I think a really, really, really good example of this, I've never told her this, and I hope she doesn't see this, because, you know, it might have influenced her in some way. Julia Nitel's performance in Dead Outlaw is such a transcendent piece of work, because she loses herself completely in her character, and yet she's always in control of herself as a performer, except what the audience sees is not a technical mastery of the craft. They're watching someone who just loves what they do so much.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah, that's
what
pretty
she
special.
does.
To this point, because what you guys are all doing, aside from like maybe Andrew and Jeb, is you guys are playing a bunch of different characters.
I know.
Right?
Yes.
In the workshop, how was that decided? How was it decided who was going to do what track? When, you know, was it always? I imagine it wasn't always something that was set, but.
It wasn't something that was set in concrete. People had a general idea. I think Cromer and Yazbek and Idemar all had a general idea of how you were going to dole out these different parts. But I don't think any of them could ever really explain that.
Right.
And this just happened. This just became aware to all of us recently during a talk back at the theater, when someone pointed out that Ken Marks, the brilliant Ken Marks, plays a number of paternal characters in the show. He plays father figures throughout the show. Cromer and Yazbek and Eric and Idemar never did that intentionally.
Oh, wow.
As they said during that talk back.
Wow.
That was a complete revelation to them. But they knew instinctually that that's how it worked.
Right.
That he would play those roles. And I think Dash, in the same way, plays the same sort of track of character throughout, and Eddie and Julia and I do as well. And I think that that's just the strength of the material, leading creative artists who don't want to impose a predetermined idea on the material. They want the material to inform them.
Right.
And again, I think that that's one of the measures of why this show is so extraordinarily special, because you've got, you know, I don't use the word genius very often. You know, Einstein was a genius.
Sure.
Like, I'm not sure the theater has that many geniuses. But come on, Yazbek, Cromer, Idemar, and Eric, genius. Yeah. You know, and one of the signs of their genius is they got out of the way of the material that they wrote, and they said, what can this material teach me?
That's interesting. I think that I've never seen a show like it. The only thing that when I saw it, I was like, especially, so we're watching the show and we were sitting pretty up close at Minetta Lane, and it's this intimate space, and Dead is such a loud opener, and you're like floored. Now, mind you, right now, the show, there's a lot of publicity about the show. A lot of people know that what happens is, it's not a spoiler to say that what happens a quarter of the way in is that Andrew dies and becomes the Dead Outlaw. That was not something that was known to us at all. This is the first preview. We've not heard any music, nothing. So we're watching it and we're just kind of like blown back in our chair when Dead starts. And then when he starts doing Killing a Man of Maine, I'm going like, what is this show? Like, what is happening? And then he dies. And you're like, oh my gosh. And you guys all turn into, you guys do Something from Nothing, but also the Mummy song, which I think is like one of my favorites in the whole score.
Oh, it is my favorite sequence in the entire show.
And it's just, the lyrics are so clever, and there's something about it that's so witty.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to ask, from the off-Broadway to Broadway, what have you noticed? Well, first of all, I don't think that there was as much audience interaction that I remember in your number from Minetta Lane to this version of it. When we watched it, you were playing with the crowd. You come up to someone in the front row. You know, it's like...
Do you know, I did that off-Broadway as well.
Oh,
I
yeah?
think it just resonates differently here.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know, a lot of people ask me that. It's like, what's the big difference between Broadway and off-Broadway? You know, and I know that there are some texture is different. You know, we've got more lights.
Yeah.
We've got a chandelier.
Yeah.
The stage is a little wider. We actually have entrances from stage left. Back at the Minetta Lane, everyone was in little cubbies on stage left because there were no exits on that side. But I think the thing that really makes a play different is from off-Broadway to Broadway is not the play itself, it's the audience. Audiences bring a different mentality to Broadway.
Yeah.
They enjoy it in a different way. They immerse themselves in a different way. And I think that that's true here. That's not taking anything away from any of the audiences downtown or any of the audiences uptown. It's just a different experience. For instance, Julia has this incredible song when she comes in as Maggie Johnson, when she comes into the Undertaker's shop, and she recognizes the body of the man she used to love. Stranger. Gorgeous song, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful performance. There were moments off-Broadway, probably more often than not, when that show didn't get a single hand clap, because the audience was just kind of stunned by that moment.
Yeah.
Moved by her loss or her confusion about this heartbreak. It was a real human experience. Now the song gets applause every single night. Sometimes it's a little late. Sometimes you can sense the audience feels the same thing they felt downtown, but they always applaud.
Yeah.
It's very, very sincere.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's a different experience. I can't explain it more than that, other than the fact that it's a difference of venue. Now, you might ask, why do I say that? Because many years ago, when Sweeney Todd was first done at New York City Opera, Steve Sondheim was asked the question, do you think Sweeney Todd is an opera? And he said, well, it is now, because it's being done in an opera house for an opera audience.
Wow.
It's oftentimes the audience is what makes a show different.
Right.
You know, it's the same material.
Yeah.
It's virtually the same cast.
Yeah.
But now it's an opera because the audience has different expectations.
Yeah.
So Broadway audiences do have different expectations.
Right.
I think when we moved uptown, we set out to do one thing, and that was to bring the core of what we did downtown, uptown, because the core of what we did downtown was something that was true to the play, something that was true to the material, something that was very special and dark and unique, and we didn't want it. It wasn't broken, so why did we have to fix it?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think we've been really, really successful, and I think audiences that come to it also come to it with this mentality of like, wow, I'm seeing this awesome kind of off-Broadway experience in a Broadway house.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that I remember walking out of the show at Minetta Lane and turning to Christian and saying, you know, I'm not sure that this is going to transfer because it doesn't necessarily feel like the most commercially viable show. It feels like this off-Broadway intimate piece. And then, which made me almost a little nervous to hear that it was transferring. Right. So I was like, I don't know how it's going to resonate in a house like this with, you know, the pretenses of this audience and all these things that we're talking about. But it totally did.
It works like gangbusters.
Is really what sells almost more so in this production.
Yeah, you know what it is? I think that there's something about when you see an off-Broadway play, audiences are always sitting forward like this, right? They're just immersed in it. I think there's a trend now in Broadway shows, musicals and plays, that are just so satisfying that audiences sit back like this, right? Because we're getting, you know, I get to see this and I get to feel better about myself.
Sure.
That's what, you know. But there's something about the mystery of a piece like Dead Outlaw. Like you said it in the first half hour of the show, you don't quite know where this is going, but you can't take your eyes away because you want to know.
Yeah.
So you're just sitting forward, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're doing a play that invites you in.
Yeah.
It really wants you to be a participant.
Yeah. And talk about an original score. an original story. I mean, that in and of itself feels rare and exciting right now. You know what I mean? And not to disparage any other show that's based on anything, but this feels like this. It's incredibly unique. You really don't know where it's going.
Right.
You know, and that's really exciting. I think it's kind of amazing how you guys had this little sneak attack last year with the award circuit. You know, it's like it was this show that you guys were the first show to open up the Audible. Now that Audible took over Minetta Lane, and it was like this, it was like this intimate musical. Who knows what? And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, they're winning Best Musical everywhere, all over the place. You know, like it was kind of amazing. And I think, yeah, exactly. And I think that contributed to this.
Yeah, there was actually, I think there was a 48-hour period when Dead Outlaw was the most honored show in terms of awards last season. Mm-hmm. Just across the board, from the Lortels, the Outer Critics, the Drama Desks,
Drama League,
the Drama League, all of these different things, and I think it still merits it up there. But I have to say, awards aside, and I think they're fantastic. And I'm so excited about the fact that we have 7 Tony nominations.
Well, that's what I was gonna. I was gonna mention that.
The real prize for all of us. And for the audiences is you get to see something that's bold, and original, and quirky, and it's difficult to express a feeling. It's difficult to sell a feeling. I have never done a show that engages an audience's feelings so much. The ovation that we get at the end of the show is like nothing I have ever heard, and I have played huge successful shows, Lion King and Miss Saigon in 4,000 seat theaters, and I've never heard roars of joy and approval and just unadulterated praise like I have in the 1,000 seat Longacre Theatre.
Yes.
Well, it's funny because Sondheim talks a lot about those moments, and people that I know that have seen the original productions of Follies and didn't know what was going to happen. He forgets his lines, or Pacific Overtures with that dance. I told him after we saw it off Broadway, we just saw something that was so unpredictable that when people will know what happened, we'll be the people that sat there and didn't know what was going to happen.
Right. Yeah,
I think, and I've talked to people who have said that for as well. They said, my experience at Dead Outlaw is something I'm going to be talking about for years and years and years because I can't explain it.
Yeah, right, for sure. How excited are you to perform at the Tonys this year?
I am so pumped.
Yeah,
we're doing the opening number.
Yeah.
And I get to be in it.
Yeah, how cool
I get
is
to
that?
be in it. It's so exciting because of the way it's been staged, the way it's being set up. That opening number just bops. It
is strong.
And one of the things I love about that number is I look out in the audience and the show begins with this beautiful ballad with Andrew and his incredible voice singing to the stars, and then you hear that train whistle and he says the iconic line that leads us into the song, and that Spencer Cohen stings that snare drum and that number starts and you see the audience just what am I watching?
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
Right.
It's so exciting. It hasn't stopped being exciting every single night.
That's awesome.
Every single night is exciting.
Because you guys are all pretty much the same cast from Off Broadway. You guys have done the show how many times already, right? And it's exciting that there's still something excited to it. And I'll tell you what else I really liked, and I was talking to Bailey about this, is that how loud it is. Because the amplification that you feel, we were in the balcony and you still felt like the reverb, and that I really appreciated.
Yeah.
Because, I thought it's just such a shake,
Yeah, I sat out there when they were teching the show, and I was astounded at not only was it loud, but it wasn't deafening.
No.
It's like no ringing in your ears.
No.
And unlike a lot of other shows this season and in past seasons that have had a lot of music like this, you can understand every single word. Every single word. And that's props to Dean Sharonow, who's our music producer, who produced the sound in tandem with Kai Harada, the sound designer. to make the entire show sound like an album, like you were listening to an album,
Yeah.
so you could enjoy it on that level.
Yeah.
And I think successful. I've never heard such a good sounding show in the theater.
Yeah, I think so too.
Could definitely be the reason why the audience, that applause.
Yeah.
Because we're matching that energy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a shake-up. Yeah, for sure. And there's laughs. There's when he mentions Tupac and Zendaya. And I was like, and I'm going, wait, did I hear? Yeah.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Okay, so we started the podcast by asking you who your I Want to Be Like You as a kid was, and to end the podcast, we want to ask you who is your I Want to Be Like You now.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. These are surprise questions. I really should have done more research into this. Who do I want to be like now? This sounds crazy. Two people.
Yeah.
All right. Our dear departed Pope Francis. He was
Yeah.
a real extraordinary person
Yeah.
in my life. But mostly, I want to just be like me.
Yeah.
I want to figure out what happens next.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I want to keep, taking one step at a time forward, seeing where my feet lead me, and if I'm in the wrong direction, correcting my path.
Yeah.
You know.
That's exciting.
And I want to keep doing Dead Outlaw for as long as I possibly can,
yeah.
because I got to tell you, I think I might take a little bit of time off after this, because anything I do after this is going to pale in comparison. This has been an extraordinary, life-changing experience for me as a person, as a creative artist, and I don't think I could be luckier.
Oh, well, you're extraordinary in the show.
Oh,
the
thank
show
you.
is extraordinary, and that joy that that I'm feeling from you right now, I'm also feeling from you in the audience.
Oh, good.
And from all of you guys. You guys look like you're having a blast up there.
We are.
And it
We
looks
are.
like so much love, especially something from nothing. When you guys are like playing around, it's so joyous, it's so fun. So
Yeah, I just gotta shout out to Eddie Cooper, who is a rock star
Awesome.
in that song.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you
I want to be
very,
like
very
Thom
much.
Sesma. I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes is produced by Elbi and Christian Cespedes. Special thanks to Angelina Cespedes, Vincenzo Salvatore Cakes, Kendall Edwards, Bailey Everett, and of course, Thom Sesma.